So this is the chapter 11, Motivation and Perceptions of Self chapter review. It's a presentation given by me, Kale, and Jonathan, so let's get right into it. This chapter contains the behavioral view of motivation, social cognitive view, other cognitive views, humanistic view, and the role of self-perceptions and motivation, along with how to motivate students with technology. So what is the behavior view of motivation? It's made up of reinforced behavior and bound by technique limitations. So it's behavior that is altered through different reinforcements like operant conditioning, but it's bound by certain limitations, which we'll get into later. So what is the effect of reinforcement? Reinforcement promotes motivation and learning by giving students something to work towards. They're more motivated to accomplish their task. It's usually praise, but it can also be a token that is traded for something of desire like free time or a toy, or something that they are working towards, like a field trip. Like I said before, operant conditioning interpretations also explain why some students prefer certain subjects over others, like why some kids are more drawn to theater and others are more drawn to math. So what are the limitations of the behavioral view? Although some results can come from positive reinforcement that are promising, there are a few cons. Students who are constantly motivated through reinforcement can become bored with learning. They're less motivated to learn without some sort of drive, without something to work towards, without having a reward, and they can lose interest very quickly. These downsides come with behavioral view reinforcement because of misuse or overuse. By rewarding too often, you lessen their motivation. So two types of motivation we should talk about are extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is behavior that is reward driven. It's accomplishing a task simply because there's a reward in store. There's something in the end, whether or not that reward relates to the material. So an example would be a student finishes their assignment early because the first to finish was promised a piece of candy. So their work might not actually be that well done, but it will be the first because they wanted what was promised. Intrinsic motivation on the opposite side is behavior that is driven by internal rewards. It's accomplishing a task for the physical, mental, or cognitive satisfaction. It's studying to become better at a test because you actually want to know the information rather than wanting to gain something tangible from it. For example, taking time to study hard, understand your coursework because you want to be more knowledgeable. So although extrinsic motivation is most common in society, it has three major dangers. One is that the changes can be temporary. So as soon as the reward has been given for the extrinsic behavior, students can revert back to their earlier negative behaviors, like disrupting class, being too talkative, not paying attention to the actual lesson. When you reward a student, it's only temporary. When the reward has been taken away or has been received completely, the student loses the motivation to keep up the behavior without some sort of incentive. Another danger is that materialistic attitudes can arise. So after a certain amount of time, the student may start to think of learning as the cash cow. They may only want to learn because they know there is something at the end. They know there is something in store. Eventually, they'll learn to weigh the work to the reward, and if the work isn't worth the reward, they simply won't do it. Another danger is that it lessens your intrinsic motivations. So students may start to heavily depend on these rewards, thus lessening their want to learn for themselves. And this can also damage their intrinsic motivations for not only that activity, but other activities as well. So this can harm students' overall learning of capabilities because it'll lessen their intrinsic motivation and lessen their want to learn just to learn. Another danger is called the undermining effect. The undermining effect is when students are rewarded with incentives so often, they begin to lose the desire to learn for themselves. However, this effect may only occur under certain circumstances. There's a delicate balance between intrinsic behavior and the undermining effect. It is not guaranteed that every time you reward a student repetitively, you'll produce the undermining effect, but there are a lot of circumstances where it is possible. So what situations increase or decrease your intrinsic motivations? So some decreasing conditions are making students compete against each other for limited rewards. For example, in PE class, making your students run a mile, but only the first person across the finish line gets extra 15 minutes of free time. It damages the self-worth of the student. And Younger children and younger adolescents tend to base their self-worth based on their accomplishments. They base how much they are worth to society on how much they've accomplished. When we limit the opportunities to succeed, intrinsic motivation declines to protect their self-worth. They're less likely to learn to protect how much they think they're worth in society. Some increasing conditions think that will increase a child's intrinsic motivations are certain rewards. So instead of competing for a single reward, having a positive verbal feedback for your students is something that helps intrinsic motivation rise because it's available to all students. It's not limited. It's not highly coveted. There's no sort of competition. It's open to all, and it allows all students to feel like they are able to achieve such a reward. So here's just a little graph illustrating the conditions and the effects they have on intrinsic motivation. Usually when presented with a competition, it's going to automatically decrease the intrinsic motivation. This doesn't happen all the time, but it is the majority of the time. When the task sparks interest and a positive verbal feedback is given, the intrinsic motivation actually increases. So you can see that right here on this graph. Feel free to pause if you need to. Quick summary of all of that, because that was a lot of information, is that teachers should try to avoid the repetitive use of rewards for altering classroom behavior. And instead, rewards should be used to endorse exploration in certain interests or to encourage students to explore something they might not already be interested in, but is of natural interest. All right, next up is the social cognitive view of motivation. The social cognitive theories emphasize two factors that strongly influence motivation to learn. Models people are exposed to, examples that we see from elders and our peers, and people's sense of self-efficacy, which can also be labeled as a person's belief of their capability and their just personal ability. So let's talk about persuasive models. Persuasive models are the idea that a student or individual would be motivated because they witnessed someone else reaping benefits from the same task. For example, a student who observes an older brother or sister reaping benefits from earning high grades may strive to do the same thing with the expectation of experiencing the same or similar benefits. Or a student who notices that a classmate receives praise from the teacher after acting in a certain way, they're going to imitate that behavior to get the same expectation. Another example could be a student has taken a liking to a teacher and wants to please them, and so their behavior is leading up to pleasing the teacher. That is their end goal. So both these types of reinforcement can raise an individual's sense of self-efficacy, which leads to higher levels of motivation. So what is self-efficacy? I've said it so many times, you think you'd understand. Even I barely understand it. Self-efficacy is a person's belief in their ability to succeed in a particular situation. Psychologist Albert Bandura describes these beliefs as determinants of how people think, behave, and feel. So it's our mindset and how much we believe in what we can accomplish. An individual's sense of self-efficacy can affect motivation to learn through the influence on the learning goal one chooses, the outcome one expects, and the attributions one gives to explain their successes and failures. I read an article about what self-efficacy is in a little bit more detail, and the author explained that it's kind of like a little engine that could attitude. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. It's what you think you can do and what you believe you can do until you do it. So self-efficacy affects our motivation, and our motivation best occurs when an individual is working towards some sort of goal. So these learning goals are different types. There's a task mastery goal, a performance approach goal, performance avoidance goal, or a combination of task mastery and performance approach, and these will differ depending on the student's self-efficacy. Some examples of these goals are task mastery approach, or is doing what is necessary to learn meaningfully the information you want to know. Task mastery is motivated to avoid situations in which you are unable to learn. It's avoiding the situations where you don't think you'll succeed in, so you don't look lesser than. Performance approach goals are demonstrating your intellectual ability to become superior or surpass your fellow classmates. You want to be on top of it all. You want to be the best of the best, not because you are the smartest and you know the most, but just because you are the best. And performance avoidance is reducing the possibility of failure so that you don't appear less capable as other students. Your main goal is to just get through the class. You're not trying to be the best. You're not trying to really learn. You just need to get through it. So are these goals detrimental? If you think about it, there are a lot of things that are pros and a lot of cons, some things that can help your motivation and a lot of things that really harm it. Some pros are that having a specific type of goal fuels your motivation and encourages students to work harder and aim for something higher than a good grade. It gives them something more personal to work towards instead of just a letter. Cons are that some of these motivation systems can be handicapping, and like a high, middle, low grade system, it persuades students that their ability has to fit in one of these categories and that grading systems won't accommodate their learning needs. So how does this affect the outcomes? Self-efficacy can also affect the student's ideal of certain outcomes. So students with high levels of self-efficacy can expect positive outcomes, whereas students with lower levels of self-efficacy expect lower outcomes. Students who achieve higher positive results tend to use time-consuming, complex thinking skills. They're the ones who are going to sit down and work through a really long algebra problem, going through every single step because they know it and they know they can do it. Students with a lower self-efficacy would see that problem and think, oh, I can't really do that. How about we do this problem instead? They are always shooting for the lower, simpler goals, and they also tend to quit a little quicker than others. Here's just a quick graph explaining that higher praise is higher self-efficacy, lower praise is going to lead to lower self-efficacy. So what else does self-efficacy affect? So it can also affect a student's attribution. So depending on how students progress in school and how their self-efficacy has developed, that is how they will attribute their success. So for example, those with a higher level of self-efficacy are likely to attribute their failure to insufficient effort. I didn't work hard enough. It was on me. It is their control. But credit their success to a combination of their effort. I got a high grade because I worked for it, because I studied for it, not because of luck. Students with a lower self-efficacy feel the opposite. If they fail, it is out of their control. It was the teachers doing it. It was the work that was too hard. And if they get a good grade, oh, it was luck. They were easy questions. They just brush it off. It's out of their personal control. This is just a quick graph just explaining where self-efficacy comes from and how it ties into your behavior. And 75% of adolescents actually have high self-efficacy levels. So do you have high self-efficacy? I encourage you to pause the video really quick and take this quiz and let us know. Jonathan's going to take you on the next part of this chapter.
Okay, so in this part of the presentation, I will be speaking about the other cognitive views of motivation. This section mainly covers 6 parts. The first 5 parts being the different cognitive views of psychologists with regards to education and motivation of students. And the 6th part is the limitation of those cognitive views. The first one is cognitive development and need for conceptual organization. This view mainly talks about the principles taught by John Piaget, which is equilibration, assimilation, accommodation, and schema formation. This teaches us that people have an inherent desire to balance their conception of the world. So when a person encounters new information, they use tools such as assimilation and accommodation to have that equilibration with their minds or in their minds. The next view is the need for achievement, which tells us that people have an inherent desire for achievement. Now, depending on the level of your need for those achievements, you will likely be able to choose between easy tasks and challenging tasks. If you have a high need for achievement, it is likely that you will pick challenging tasks over easy tasks. This view also tells us that if we see success in a task or in something that we would like to study, we are likely to have greater motivation for that. If not, then our motivation is lowered. We also learn that people, when they experience success in their life, they are likely to not fear challenging tasks and would therefore lead to more good choices that makes them progress. The next view is attribution theory, which basically means how the person gives reason or cause to their situation. If a low performing student becomes successful, he would attribute it to luck or easy questions, while high achieving students would attribute those success to hard work. This means that high achieving students take control of their lives. They believe that if they work hard, they progress and be successful. Unlike low performing students who believe that it is just because of luck that they became successful. The next view is the nature of cognitive ability, which how the person views ability. Some people view ability as being unchangeable. These people are the entity theories, and the people who think ability is changeable and is able to be improved is incremental theories. While other people who believe that ability can be improved and but in some concepts it cannot be improved, these people are called the mixed theories. The next view is the effect of interest on intrinsic motivation. This mainly speaks on how people are interested in different things with different levels of intensity. If you have a personal interest for something, you are more motivated, and the interest is persistent. Unlike if you have a situational interest, you are only interested for that uh, topic for a short time. Now, these are the factors of personal interest, and these are the factors of situational interest. If you need to review them, you can go ahead and pause and read through these points. Now, there's also something called the concept of flow. The concept of flow is a mental state of high engagement in an activity. It is characterized by intense concentration, sustained interest, and enjoyment of the activity's challenge. Now, as teachers, this is very important because we want students to have this kind of mental state, but it would depend on how good we are at making the students interested in the things we teach. Now, the limitations is that in cognitive development, it is hard to make students or have the students feel this cognitive disequilibrium. While in need for achievement, it's hard to assess if the student has a high need or a low need for achievement. For attribution theory, it's difficult to change faulty attributions. If the student think that they only succeeded because the questions were easy, it's hard to tell them that it is because of their hard work that they succeeded on that certain activity. Now, for the next part of my or section of my presentation, this is called the humanistic view of motivation. So we move on from the cognitive view into the humanistic view, which basically tells us how um, uh, the progress of a person depends or is based on how he or she would want to feel fulfillment in his or her life. Now, this theory, the hierarchy needs of theory, is studied by Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow is one of those humanist psychologists. In his theory, he teaches that there are 5 levels of needs people um, need to achieve before they move on to the next step. First one is physiological, which are food and water. Basically, what people need in order to live physically. Second one is safety, which includes assurance, nurturance, money, house, etc., which gives them feelings of safety. Next one is belongingness and love. This is the social part of their life. And the next one is esteem, or um, having respect from those people he or she encounters with or interacts with. The top section of this pyramid is the self-actualization, which means that a person is on the process of achieving self-fulfillment. He or she would like to maximize his or her potential. Now, if they haven't succeeded on the previous levels, they couldn't move to the next one. Um, so the implication of this is that um, teachers should satisfy the first levels of the students' needs in order for them to be in the state of self-actualization. The problem here is that teachers can't really um, give all those needs or provide all those needs to the students. That becomes difficult and hard to apply. But yeah, the main idea of this theory is that we need stuffs, we need things. The the main idea of this concept is that people need certain things before they be in the process of self-fulfillment. And so that will be the end of my part of our presentation.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the role of self-perceptions in motivation. So current interest in the effects of self-perceptions have been prompted by our understanding of self-concept and self-esteem, Bandura's introduction to self-efficacy, advances in the measurement of self-perceptions, and positive relationships between self-perceptions, motivation, and school achievement. So there are 3 psychologists mentioned in the textbook who specifically studied self-perceptions in motivation. Those are Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and Arthur Combs. And basically, they explained that students see, or how students see and judge themselves affects how motivated they are. So the textbook listed 4 main types of self-perceptions. The first is identity, which is who a person feels they are and where they belong. Examples are, I am an animal lover, or I am a female, or I'm going to be a writer. The next one is self-esteem, which is how people feel about themselves. So like, I'm a good person, or I'm not good enough is a very common one actually. I'm happy with myself the way I am is one of them. Self-concept is the next one, which is how capable or competent a person feels they are. So for example, someone saying, I'm good at sports, or I'm bad at talking to people. The last one is self-efficacy, which we've talked about already. It's like people's beliefs about their ability to carry out specific actions, such as I'll never understand imaginary numbers, or I can get a B in this class. So the role of academic self-concept in motivation and learning is that prior achievement leads to more self-concept, which leads to subsequent achievement. So, for example, I'll use the example of I'm bad at talking to people because I have personal experience with that one. I've had a lot of awkward conversations in the past, so my prior achievement was negative. So that led to less positive self-concept, which led to me in the future believing I was bad at talking to people and having even more awkward conversations because I just thought awkwardness was a part of my personality. And there's another example from the textbook down at the corner of this slide if you want to pause and look at that one. So Teachers can improve academic self-concept by pointing out how well their students are doing and how well they've learned certain skills or pieces of knowledge. And they can improve achievement by teaching information processing and self-regulation skills. So, motivation and identity. Jacqueline Eccles, I think that's how you say that, argues that identity is made up of two self-perceptions. The first one, she says, is perceptions of skills, characteristics, and competencies. So, abilities, who we are, and the things we're able to do. The second one, she said, was perceptions of personal values and goals. So what's important to us and what we want to achieve. So the textbook explained that identity influences our actions, as well as our expectations for success and what we think is important. So yeah, ways to enhance motivation. Interest can be triggered by a situation that attracts attention. For example, in middle school, my social studies teacher liked to take a plastic sword and scream and wave it around while talking about wars and stuff in, say, Mesopotamia. Interest can be maintained through interactions that connect their skills to prior knowledge and prior knowledge to the situation. So, like, I remember my interest was maintained about like Phoenicians in the Mesopotamia area because I think I remember them making calendars and stuff. This was a long time ago before we had calendars. So I thought that was cool because it, related to the modern day, things I'm familiar with. And lastly, seeing their own experiences and skills as connected to the situation helps students identify with that situation and be able to engage and re-engage similar situations on their own. So, suggestions for teachers. They should make learning inviting to students. And ways they can do this is by meeting Maslow's safety and belonging needs, providing students opportunities to make meaningful contributions to the class. Like, if students feel like their presence in the class is adding to the class, they will be more motivated and more interested, and they'll want to learn more. Teachers can create a sense of purpose for the material students are supposed to learn, help them know that what they're doing is important and that it's good to know. They can allow students a little freedom to control some of their learning, because students don't want to sit and like listen to lectures over and over again for hours every week. They need some flexibility to be able to learn for themselves. And then teachers should also create challenging tasks for their students, because students aren't learning if they can do everything they're assigned really easily. Another thing teachers can do is direct learning experiences to feelings of success. So help students establish and meet their goals. Invite students to participate in selecting class objectives. So allow them the opportunity to play a part in what they do in class. And teachers should do what they can to help students succeed. So now, motivating students using technology. Technology can do a lot of things, and students, especially nowadays, in the modern days, technology is a very common thing that a lot of students really like. So the textbook said that students who work on computer-based drill and practice programs are motivated by immediate feedback and the steady progress they make. It also mentioned that involving students in fantasy environments or authentic tasks directed to audiences other than the teacher are motivating because it gives students a sense of confidence, personal responsibility, and control over their learning. One example of a fantasy environment is my little brother, Declan, likes to ask for permission to do homework, which is playing what he calls a school game, where he gets to like fight bad guys, but in order to do his attacks against the bad guy, he has to answer a question correctly. So that's helping him learn stuff, even though he mainly plays it for fun. And then email and other messaging systems are often used to increase interest and motivation, because people can more easily ask questions and interact with others. And then connecting students to real people and events provides extrinsic motivation to learn and stimulates intrinsic motivation. So technology can engage students in ways that enhance listening, reading, and writing skills. It can make students less anxious about difficulties and more likely to persist, because a lot of students are more familiar with technology and less anxious because, you know, technology doesn't think and won't do weird things that we can't figure out like people can. Technology can improve students' motivation for reading and writing, and technology can help students complete inquiry projects and allow them to present their results to parents, peers, and siblings with things such as like slideshows, like what we're using here. And yeah, that's everything. So thanks for watching our presentation. I hope y'all have a fantastic and amazing rest of your day.